The final frame caught on video showed someone's fingers' music, wrapped in thick fabric, moving with eerie purpose, right toward the glass. After that, total darkness. The broadcast went completely dead precisely at 1:47 music in the morning. We are diving into the unsettling case of Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old resident who seemingly evaporated from her Arizona residence within exactly 41 minutes. Yet, this documentary uncovers much more than a simple missing persons file. It focuses heavily on the invisible barricades erected around the inquiry from day one, exposing the individuals responsible for constructing them, the hidden motives behind that silence, and the profound price paid for it. We will meticulously examine each piece of physical evidence, analyze every intentionally stalled clue, music, and unpack every public remark that strips the mask off the actual events unfolding within the local sheriff's headquarters while this elderly woman remained unaccounted for. Keep watching, because absolutely zero aspects of this mystery align with the initial narrative fed to the public. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you just found us. We never deal in wild theories around here. We dig up the hard facts. The calendar read January 31st, 2026. It was a weekend twilight down in the desert landscape of Tucson. Born on the 27th of January, 1942, our subject enjoyed a typical family gathering at her child's place, sharing a meal, playing board games, an entirely routine weekend. Then, at 9:48 p.m., the woman's son-in-law dropped her back at her property, waiting until the heavy mechanical door safely shut with her inside. No loved one would ever lay eyes on her again after that specific moment. The ensuing events had to be pieced together using merely 3 music electronic footprints. Just before 2, specifically at 1:47 a.m., the front porch security feed dropped out. This was no technical glitch. An unknown individual music intentionally severed the connection. Fast forward to 2:12 a.m., an inside alarm trigger detected a physical presence but captured zero video. It merely left behind a digital marker, a chilling, automated confirmation that a shadowy figure was navigating those hallways. Then came 2:28 music a.m. The victim's implanted heart monitor suddenly stopped syncing with her mobile application, permanently registering music. The precise second that vital transmission vanished, the lens blinded, the sensors tripped. Music, the cardiac device flatlined. 41 minutes. That narrow time frame was the sole puzzle piece handed to law enforcement. Imagine the crime scene analysts arriving at dawn, screens casting an eerie light across a darkened office, the frantic clattering of typing echoing around them, an investigator frantically scribbling digital markers onto a yellow notebook, simultaneously watching an IT specialist extract broken files from a remote network that logically should have been completely empty. The heavy atmosphere suffocating the squad room was entirely justified. The elderly woman relied entirely on her heart implant to survive. According to official statements later released by authorities, the medications she required, music, were so critical that missing them for just 24 hours could easily trigger a fatal outcome. Time slipping away wasn't merely a dramatic phrase. It was a brutal biological ultimatum. Think about it: if you were staring down those 3 chilling electronic records, knowing federal agents were already stationed downstairs and waiting to strike, who would you dial first? Surprisingly, the very first outreach executed during this inquiry triggered a catastrophic domino effect. A sequence so flawed that the department's former deputy leader ultimately called it an 11-year vendetta disguised as standard protocol. Grasping the baffling methodology behind this police work requires you to first look deeply into the mind of the commander pulling the strings. The reality is that the deeply flawed choices shaping this massive scandal didn't manifest out of thin air. They stemmed from a deeply rooted past, a highly publicized, 11-year battlefield shared between the county's top brass and the Federal Bureau. Once you uncover music, the truth about that long-standing rivalry, all the bizarre tactics we cover in this documentary shed the label of simple incompetence. Instead, they begin resembling a deeply sinister, premeditated strategy, The lead official had embedded himself within the local precinct for dozens of years long before he ever claimed the throne as boss. He possessed an intimate knowledge of the hierarchy, the unspoken rules, and the bureaucratic gamesmanship that only a lifelong veteran could master. He recognized exactly who had his back and who desperately wanted him gone. The man was well aware of every vulnerability within his ranks. More importantly, he viewed the federal government not as a partner in justice, but as the very institution that previously launched a massive, high-stakes probe right at the heart of his own precinct. Flashback to 2015, when federal authorities initiated a severe inquiry into the local agency over rumors of them heavily mishandling confiscated civilian money. We are talking about massive piles of cash and high-value items systematically gathered up during police raids. This involves confiscated wealth that precincts must rigorously document to satisfy intense governmental watchdogs. And this probe wasn't kept under wraps. It ignited a massive media firestorm. Understandably, this fiasco dragged the entire precinct under a massive magnifying glass right when the leading officer desperately required the community's blind trust. The ensuing chaos was the primary reason the commander suffered a crushing defeat at the ballot box in 2016. Music. Just let that sink in for a second. Here was a lifelong defender of the law who spent countless years walking the exact same corridors, suddenly humiliated and ousted by the community, all while an intimidating government probe cast a massive shadow over his legacy. This isn't just a theoretical grievance. This is the story of a powerful figure forced to watch his entire life's work be shredded to pieces, knowing fully well that a government bureau was operating the shredder. Music. Eventually, he clawed his way back into power. He walked back through those doors. He took up the mantle once again. The walls hadn't changed, and the uniform remained identical. However, an irreversible change had warped his entire perspective regarding the very institution that dragged his name through the mud. A man named Richard Castigar Jr. understood this dark reality more intimately than basically any other soul music on this earth, having operated as the sheriff's primary lieutenant, holding the number 2 spot for multiple years. He possessed a front-row seat to the chaos until stepping away in 2023 following a massive 46-year career. When this investigation finally blew wide open, he refused to hide behind unnamed sources. He went straight to the Daily Mail, putting his reputation on the line to publicly expose the open secret everyone in the precinct was already whispering about. His absolute contempt for federal agents is no secret. Ever since they probed his precinct back in 2016, he has been simmering with rage. The man simply cannot let things go, and that assessment did not originate from some rival politician. Nor was it just some reporter trying to guess his underlying motives. It was stated by a colleague who shared a workspace with Nanos for years, someone who witnessed his leadership style firsthand. Navigating the intense stress, bureaucratic games, and relentless grind of managing a massive policing entity, Castigar went on to describe him as the ultimate control freak, someone whose obsessive oversight completely undermined his own efficiency. 2 distinct descriptions. A single witness, backed by 46 years of direct, boots-on-the-ground experience validating those claims. Now, picture what happens when the absolute biggest investigation music of your entire career lands on your desk. But cracking it means surrendering crucial physical proof to the very same agency you blame for ruining your professional life. Does that choice stay purely objective? How much of that bitter resentment creeps into the office alongside you the moment you have to make that pivotal choice? Because in February of 2026, music, that precise nightmare, became a reality. Federal agents were standing right there. The physical proof was secured, and a monumental choice was finalized. The true nature of that choice, the financial toll it took, and the gaping holes it exposed within the chain of custody music, is the exact dark path we are heading down right now, roughly 2 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's residence. In a barren patch of land right off the highway, a detective knelt to photograph a chilling discovery. One solitary, dark-colored hand covering, snug and pitch black. It was a dead ringer for the exact item seen on the suspect sneaking past the doorbell lens 14 days prior. Deep inside its fabric hid microscopic traces of life, a genetic footprint belonging to an unnamed, untraced male suspect. This crucial item was bagged on the 15th of February, 2026, precisely 14 days after the inquiry began, the second that item hit the property room. The protocol should have been incredibly straightforward. You extract music, the genetic material, you bounce those markers across the federal registry. You wait for the hit. That eventual ping will either name your perpetrator or completely shut down a dead-end lead, forcing you down a fresh track. Whatever happens, the hunt continues. Music, that is the fundamental purpose of modern forensics. It is the literal reason detectives gather the items in the first place. The Federal Bureau possessed a flawless, battle-tested system designed specifically for this exact moment. Send the physical proof straight to their facility in Quantico, Virginia. Let their elite laboratory technicians cross-check it through CODIS, the massive government network housing the genetic blueprints of more than 19 million convicted offenders. Imagine the setup. A glowing computer screen inside a highly secure laboratory, an analyst carefully comparing music, established genetic markers with the mystery swab. One single notification capable of shifting 400 task force members' music into an entirely different one. Synchronized direction. That massive resource network was not just a pipe dream. It was fully operational and practically begging for the opportunity to help. Even if the National Registry struck out, a backup option was waiting in the wings. Othram, a cutting-edge genealogical testing facility based in Texas. The very same masterminds who cracked that chilling university student tragedy out in Idaho. During that particular manhunt, microscopic evidence pulled from a weapon casing was shipped to Othram. Inside of 48 hours, they managed to map out the perpetrator's bloodline and construct an entire ancestral web. They successfully funneled the suspect pool down to just 2 households in Pennsylvania. Authorities slapped cuffs on a suspect 47 days after the music initial incident. It was an undeniable, well-documented, and highly replicable success story. Federal agents pleaded with Sheriff Nanos to forward that crucial fabric piece to their Virginia headquarters. He flat out refused. Reuters verified this shocking denial on Music, the 12th of February, citing an inside source from within the federal task force. Instead, the sheriff opted to mail the physical proof to DNA Labs International, an independent commercial facility situated down in Deerfield Beach, Florida, over 2,000 miles away from Tucson. The local government ended up blowing Music, roughly $200,000 of civilian tax money, purposely rerouting crucial findings Music to a totally separate, for-profit business, utterly ignoring the elite federal operation that was already on site and Music practically begging to handle it for free. Behind closed doors, the federal reaction, later leaked to News Nation, was crystal clear. Insiders branded the move as utterly foolish and completely unhinged. The withheld physical items were widely regarded as the entire foundation of their ongoing manhunt. Eventually, that Florida-based commercial lab pushed the genetic footprint through the national system. Music, it came back totally blank. The mystery suspect's markers failed to link up with any of the 19 million individuals logged inside the massive government registry. Right after that dead end, the analysis of the organic matter found inside the residence finally dropped. Insiders tied to the operation leaked to CBS News that the microscopic traces scooped up from within the victim's house were incredibly degraded, frustratingly incomplete, and heavily contaminated by the genetic signatures of people who legally occupied the property. It was practically worthless for building a traditional suspect profile. But then came the bombshell twist that completely flipped the narrative. The dual sets of genetic material, the hand covering and the indoor swab, were totally disconnected. 2 completely distinct Music, unidentified phantoms. Neither one pinged in the federal system. And now a $200,000 roadblock was standing squarely between the physical proof and the advanced ancestry tracking methods that C.C. Moore, the brilliant investigative geneticist responsible for bringing down the Idaho suspect, so highly recommended. Music, they could have had answers in a matter of minutes or maybe hours. Yet, 25 days down the line, they were staring at absolutely no clear persons of interest. Music, taking the route the top brass decided to walk. You have to wonder, when the perfect asset is sitting right there, begging to jump in. What is the actual price of shutting them out? In this particular nightmare, they are still tallying up the grim toll of that exact choice. 400 sets of boots had hit the pavement for this hunt. Federal agents had touched down, hardened major crimes, investigators bringing decades of raw, street-level wisdom were pacing the halls. Every piece of the puzzle was right at their fingertips. The brilliant minds were ready. The sheer numbers were overwhelming. Yet every solitary call had to funnel through a trio of guys. Only three. Insiders Music, operating deep inside the Puma County Sheriff's Network, whispered to the Daily Mail, demanding absolute secrecy while the hunt was still burning hot. The picture they painted was far from a well-oiled machine designed to catch the bad guy. It sounded like an impenetrable tower designed purely to hoard power. The head sheriff, Nanos, had locked up every shred of authority regarding the Nancy Guthrie mystery, keeping it strictly between Music himself, Chief Jesus Lopez, and Captain Juan Carlos Navarro. That specific trio acted as a tight net, catching and filtering every tactical move, every overarching strategy, and every single whisper of intel that flowed up or down the ladder. One insider did not mince words. The top dog would only allow himself or his two chosen lieutenants to pull the strings. Music, the rest of the squad was just taking orders. Nobody else was permitted a voice, much less an independent thought. A second whistleblower laid out the disastrous fallout of that exact setup. Under typical circumstances, a grizzled investigator would take the wheel. Music on a thriller like this, passing the latest breakthroughs up the ladder. But the reality on the ground was completely backwards. The suits and ties in the front office Music were the ones pressing the gas pedal. All that veteran detective talent was strapped into the passenger seat, ordered Music to zip their lips. It was a classic case of the tail dictating terms to the dog. That old saying hits incredibly hard once Music. You see it playing out in real time. Imagine an entire room packed with sleuths who have spent their whole lives chasing down shadow operatives who take people into the dark. Music professionals who can read the silent evidence, decode the twisted minds. Music, and feel the ticking clock suffocating a mystery centered on a vulnerable senior who desperately needs her medication. Those heavy hitters were standing right there, their brilliance ripe for the picking. But the brass hovering above absolutely refused to tap into it. Music, the Federal Bureau was smashing their heads against that exact same brick wall from the outside looking in. A federal insider revealed to the American Tribune that the operatives' Music had hit a maddening dead end, completely baffled as to why they were being frozen out. The head honcho was putting up an absolute barricade, Music, against them. They could not fathom the reasoning. We are not just talking about some annoying red tape here. This is the premier federal unit, summoned to hunt down the truth, arriving with their heavy artillery, only to be forced to wander blindfolded in a purposely generated smokescreen. A retired Music federal operative, Maureen O'Connell, laid it out flat for News Nation, saying, "When the gears jam up, you look straight to the crown. The rot almost never starts with the gritty men and women pounding the pavement. Music, and those street-level warriors, by all reports, were grinding themselves into the dust. Patrol units scouring the grid, seasoned cops chasing ghosts, and the desk wizards digging through shadows. Music, pouring in from a hotline that had rung over 19,000 times. The engine of this massive hunt was definitely roaring. Yet the hands gripping the steering wheel had bottlenecked the entire route down to three guys whose biggest flex seemed to be how closely they shadowed the top boss. The ex-commander of the Puma County Tactical Strike Team, Bob Creer, warned News Nation that this pressure cooker was seconds away from blowing its lid. Sooner or later, someone has to force their way over that moat. The sheer firepower the feds bring to the table dwarfs whatever the local precinct can scramble together. But even 25 suns into this nightmare, nobody had dared to make that crossing. Music, it begs a chilling question: how does a manhunt even function when the apex predators trained to crack it are being forcefully stiff-armed by Music? The very officials supposedly leading the charge imagine possessing the ultimate weapon. But the key to unlock it is swallowed. With a mere trio, isolated in a room dictating the flow of truth to 400 desperate searchers. You are absolutely not running a full-throttle pursuit. You are running a crippled operation choking on its own narrowest pipe. And that very choke point shared some dark blood with the federal boys that no one behind those closed doors was ready to spill music to the cameras just yet. Every missing person thriller survives on a single, unbreakable rule of the underworld: total command over the narrative. You feed the crowds only the specific breadcrumbs that turn them into your eyes and ears. Every other gritty detail gets buried in the vault, under absolutely zero conditions. Do you ever music broadcast to the phantom you are hunting exactly what cards you hold, what your blind spots are, or when you plan to kick their door in? Keeping your mouth shut is not playing it safe. It is the literal difference between life and death. The exact second the target figures out the limits of your radar, they can dance in those shadows forever. But the top brass went straight onto primetime screens and shattered that golden rule into a million little pieces. On the 23rd of February, day music 23 of the manhunt, he took a seat with the national network and confessed to the world that their genetic fingerprinting was hitting roadblocks, casually dropping that the answers could be delayed for weeks, or maybe even months, perhaps 12 months, or even just days or weeks. Imagine the individual who abducted Nancy Guthrie sitting there, glued to that broadcast, in their own home, staring at the glowing monitor, watching the Pima County top brass speaking face-to-face with a major network journalist, laying out in crystal clear terms the precise timeframe detectives needed to nail down a suspect. For that viewer, this was far from a routine media briefing. It handed them a strategic advantage, serving as absolute proof that the ticking countdown detectives faced was quite generous. And the leaks did not stop there. Prior to this point in the case, the department's leader openly broadcasted that federal agents were using an airborne Bluetooth tracker strapped to a chopper, expressly to hunt down the signal from the victim's heart implant. This hardware was meant to remain strictly classified. For it to work, the chopper had to hover incredibly close to the ground, right near the intended frequency source. The scanning radius was exceptionally small. The entire strategy hinged on the perpetrator being completely oblivious to the tactic. As soon as the media broadcasted it, that tactical edge vanished entirely. President Trump even called out this blunder straight from Air Force One on the 19th of February. He expressed clear frustration that authorities announced their plan to track the medical device before the search even got underway. He pointed out that if such surveillance was possible, the individual keeping Nancy captive would just take steps to block the signal. This is hardly a partisan opinion. It is fundamental tactical reasoning, voiced by a viewer tuning into the exact same television reports as the rest of the country. Ultimately, the aerial scans for the medical implant failed to pick up any verifiable trace. During the second day of the probe, the lead official informed journalists that the victim going without her prescriptions could turn fatal within 24 hours. While clinically correct, this statement handed crucial intel straight to her captor. It mapped out the exact time frame. It gave the perpetrator a definitive countdown for when her survival odds would drastically plummet. Furthermore, on the 22nd of February, Nanos went on national television to announce detectives were closing in on the perpetrator's footwear, trousers, top, and coat, adding that they were actively parading pictures of a weapon carrier to firearm merchants in the area. A separate network report detailed federal authorities stepping into a minimum of one firearms dealer, carrying roughly 24 different photos. Each piece of leaked information served as a roadmap for the culprit, detailing precisely what evidence the authorities possessed and their exact game plan. Contrast this with the Idaho case, where federal authorities released a single bulletin prior to capturing Brian Koberger. They simply described an average-sized male standing 5'9" to 5'10". Absolutely zero additional details. They shared zero forensic schedules, zero surveillance tactics, zero wardrobe hints, and zero procedural secrets. 47 days passed, and they had their man in custody. Put yourself in the shoes of a detective sitting in that briefing area, witnessing every single confidential detail being broadcast live. What thoughts would race through your mind? How intense would your frustration be? Because that massive divide between the information blurted out to the public and the secrets that demanded strict confidentiality might just be the fatal flaw in this entire saga. If you truly want to grasp why the Guthrie probe hit a brick wall, you have to examine a scenario where every single moving part aligned perfectly, where competent professionals executed flawless choices in the perfect sequence, ensuring critical clues reached the proper destinations without delay, yielding a swift resolution that the Tucson department should have treated as their gold standard. Take November 13th, 2022. In Moscow, Idaho, authorities discovered 4 college scholars who had violently lost their lives inside an off-campus residential property. Searching the grisly scene produced a single, monumental physical clue. The perpetrator dropped a blade cover. That solitary item harbored just one genetic profile belonging to an unidentified man. Detectives immediately shipped this genetic material over to an advanced forensic lab. Astoundingly, barely 48 hours after the specialists accepted the submission, their cutting-edge genealogical analysis mapped out the individual's lineage, traced a comprehensive relative network, and pinpointed the hunt down to a pair of households located in Pennsylvania. Federal agents leveraged those genetic blueprints to construct a rock-solid target profile. Task force members quickly tracked the person down, initiated round-the-clock observation, snagged a backup genetic swab from tossed-out garbage, verified the biological link, and slapped the cuffs on him. Authorities secured Brian Koberger behind bars exactly 47 days following the brutal crimes. 47 days. A singular genetic swab. A lone facility. A seamless chain of custody flowing without a hitch from the compromised bedroom all the way to a jail cell. At no point did the Federal Bureau host media circuses breaking down their tracking capabilities. They refused to broadcast their lab schedules across the nation's airwaves. Nor did they ever publicly verify the specific garments they were hunting or the retail stores they were canvassing. Leadership released just one solitary bulletin detailing the culprit's bodily appearance, keeping their mouths completely shut until the perpetrator was locked away. Contrast that absolute discipline with the absolute disaster in Arizona. The hand covering discovered 2 miles away from the victim's residence on the 15th of February contained genetic traces from an unidentified male. Federal authorities practically begged to ship it to their elite Quantico headquarters. Bafflingly, it ended up routed down to Florida instead. That southern facility failed to generate any database hits whatsoever. Meanwhile, the biological traces pulled from inside the house were severely degraded, fragmented, and hopelessly contaminated. Those biological profiles simply failed to align, prompting the county's top brass to hit the national airwaves on day 23, framing their genetic evidence hurdles, music, as a grueling puzzle that could devour weeks, months, or even a full year before yielding any solid leads. Yet the exact same cutting-edge ancestral tracing that cracked the Idaho mystery wide open in 47 days had been sitting right there in Tucson from the very first morning. C.C. Moore, the brilliant investigative geneticist instrumental in unmasking the Idaho perpetrator, shared with CNN her profound optimism regarding the Guthrie tragedy. She explained that if the person of interest had deep-rooted American lineage, the advanced cellular sequencing driving this investigative science might just point to a name within mere minutes or a handful of hours. And she wasn't exaggerating the power of this breakthrough technique. She was simply laying out the precise miracle we all watched unfold during that harrowing northern state investigation. Othram's chief executive, David Mittleman, went on the record with the Daily Mail to discuss the handling of the Guthrie inquiry. He stressed that rapid results were absolutely critical, issuing a stark caution against creating bottlenecks in the forensic workflow, a caution delivered long after crucial time had already slipped away. Retired federal investigator Jennifer Coffindaffer pushed the envelope even more, shining a spotlight on a deeply concerning theory, asking out loud if that independent Florida facility might have permanently ruined the vital biological traces required for ancestral tracking to actually work. She wondered if the exact material capable of mirroring that 47-day Idaho triumph had been so poorly managed that a quick resolution was now completely off the table. To this day, the authorities have yet to offer the public a straight answer to that chilling inquiry. However, the glaring contrast between these two parallel investigations speaks volumes on its own. One tragedy benefited from an ironclad evidence trail, the perfect testing facility, and national agency support. securing handcuffs in 47 days. The alternative scenario featured a tainted forensic route and a local boss actively locking out federal help music, hitting day 25 without a single viable person of interest on the radar. The massive gulf separating music, those contrasting realities, wasn't a twist of fate. It was a deliberate choice. A profound gravity surrounds any declaration delivered by a person who music stands to inherit absolutely zero benefit from speaking up. No campaign strategy, no bitter turf war, no bureaucratic music, detachment from the inner workings at play, wielding nothing but decades of frontline experience and a firm belief that citizens needed to hear the brutal truth. And that is exactly what ignited when the inner circle music surrounding Sheriff Nanos finally broke their silence. Richard Castigar Jr. Music is greater than wasn't some rookie officer peddling a water cooler rumor. He served as the ultimate second-in-command, the true right hand, the guy sharing the executive suite with Chris Nanos for countless years prior to hanging up his badge in 2023 following music. 46 consecutive years of dedication to that exact agency. Sitting down with the Daily Mail, he pulled zero punches. He refused to sugarcoat a single detail. He laid out precisely what history needed to register. Music. This entire inquiry should have been handed directly to the federal authorities 2 weeks prior. Every shred of physical proof needed to be shipped to Quantico right out of the gate. Then he dropped the bombshell quote that permanently framed how the world views this entire debacle. The man harbors an intense music contempt for the Federal Bureau. They probed his agency back in 2016, and the fury still burns. He absolutely clings to that bitter resentment. He followed up with a revelation that completely shifts the lens on every tactical move we've scrutinized throughout this program. The boss is a textbook control freak who completely fails at getting results. Just 2 sentences, backed by 46 years of intense daily observation. Yet, Castigar wasn't standing alone in the spotlight. That detail is crucial, as one isolated critic, no matter their resume, is easily brushed off as having a vendetta. What you absolutely cannot ignore is a rising chorus of whistleblowers' music, stepping out from the very same corridors of power, spanning various ranks and distinct levels of authority. Each individual independently landed on the exact same dark realization. Sergeant Aaron Cross commands the Pima County Deputies Organization as its president. This is the very labor coalition safeguarding the top brass's personal fleet of officers. The badge wearers, under his direct thumb, the men and women navigating the trenches of his precinct day in and day out. Cross didn't bother tiptoeing around the harsh realities he witnessed. He looked journalists in the eye and stated that a widespread consensus exists within those walls suggesting this manhunt has music mutated into a pure vanity project for Sheriff Nanos. That isn't some armchair detective's theory. It's the resounding internal verdict, music, voiced loudly by the chosen spokesperson of the department's own rank and file. Former Chief Deputy Richard Carmona also took to the airwaves. He offered unhesitating admiration for the frontline heroes grinding through the leads. The field investigators, the patrol units, the lab nerds, every single person, music, pouring their souls into the endgame. Then, he shifted his crosshairs upward, striking with the surgical accuracy of a man, music, who once held that exact high-stakes position and understands exactly how true command should operate. We feel deeply let down by the absolute void of guidance at the executive tier. Imagine that calling out a crippling lack of direction on national broadcasts. A retired second-in-command openly condemning his former precinct's reigning boss. Ex-federal intelligence operative, music. Maureen O'Connell previously diagnosed the systemic rot here with chilling accuracy. When things go off the rails, the poison almost always drips from the ceiling. Rarely do you find the breakdown among the street-level warriors actually grinding through the grit. 3 separate accounts, originating from 3 distinct perspectives within or just outside that very agency, all leading to one undeniable conclusion. It begs the question, what pushes veteran personnel, folks who dedicated their entire lives to a badge, to step out of the shadows, individuals whose very identities are woven into the fabric of the department, suddenly breaking rank and speaking out against their own brass, right in the middle of an ongoing search for a vanished individual. Nobody makes that kind of leap lightly. That is the kind of move you make only when keeping your mouth shut becomes far too expensive a burden to bear. The culture of secrecy within those walls carried a heavy toll, and the true victims certainly were not the brass huddled in their private offices. By the 24th dawn of the search, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie reminds us that behind every headline is a human life, a family, and a fragile window of time where every decision matters. In moments of crisis, the difference between cooperation and conflict can shape the fate of an entire investigation. When agencies compete instead of collaborate, the truth can become harder to reach, and precious time slips away. One of the most powerful lessons from this story is the importance of humility in leadership. No single person or department holds all the answers. Real strength comes from recognizing when help is needed and allowing the best minds and resources to work together toward a common goal. Justice is rarely achieved by pride or control. It is achieved by transparency, teamwork, and accountability. This case also highlights the quiet courage of ordinary people. Nancy's family refused to stay silent. By speaking honestly and offering a reward, they transformed public attention into action and reminded the world that persistence matters, even when hope feels fragile. Ultimately, Nancy Guthrie's story is a call to remember our shared responsibility. Communities, investigators, and leaders must work with integrity and urgency when a life is at stake. Because in cases like this, the true measure of justice is not only solving the mystery, it is ensuring that no person disappears into silence without the world continuing to search for the truth.